Okay.
All right, so what we're going to do is just the front part of the jacket where it attaches to the lining. And so this piece represents your facing, and then this is your lining piece. For the sake of the sample, we're using 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we have joined these two pieces together on this curved edge, okay? So now that is done, and I'm gonna place the outside of the jacket piece together with these two, and I'm only going to sew together the neckline and the front, because if I were doing the whole garment, you know, my shoulders would need to be attached before this next step. I wouldn't sew this across. So 1/4 inch seams, and you would have a collar in here as you're doing this part, but for the sake of just the lining instruction, we'll just do this miniature. Now, if I'm going to do a 1 inch hem, I'm going to go ahead and cut the width of this facing, and I'm going to cut away my lining 1 inch, like so. Then I can go across here 1/4. And then when I sew this part of the lining to the hem, I'm going to sew this at 1/4 inch. Don't catch anything else, just this two hems, the lining hem to the bottom hem. And give this stuff just a little bit of room, don't go all the way to the edge. All right, so now when I turn this out, you can see that the lining has pulled up my hem, so I don't need to make a hem, right? And this part here that is my facing, this is the part that folds back that you see. That would be your lapel, and then your collar would have been sewn into the neckline. All right, so that's how you would finish the edge of a jacket. And I'm gonna play a video in a minute too, so you can see what the person did with the full scale jacket. All right, so that's that one. That's that sample. And you can go back in and you know, with a needle and thread, if it doesn't come out perfect, just attach these pieces by hand. It's more of a tailoring technique when you do these things. Has anyone ever taken a full tailored jacket apart? Have you ever seen what's inside of a tailored jacket? It's so many layers. You have like a chest piece that's like an interfacing, thick, sometimes as much as a horsehair type interfacing, real stiff. And then you have, you know, the collar with the interfacing and a lining, and it can be as many as 5 layers. And they do that, I don't know if you remember in your beginning sewing class, the patch stitch by hand that you did. That's to bring all those pieces together. I used to have an old jacket of my husband's that I would show. It's pretty amazing when you take it apart how many layers are in there. But that's tailoring. For fashion, we just can use fusing for this piece and fusing for the collar, and that's enough. It doesn't have to have all that construction. But for fine tailoring, it's a lot of handwork. So a jacket cost will depend on that. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to set aside that sample for the lining, and I'm going to show you the skirt. Now the skirt would be joined at the side seams. If it had a back zipper, you know, you would leave that part open. But just again, to show you that it's going to keep free, the lining is going to keep free of the skirt. I'm gonna sew this facing, 1/4 inch again for the sample, but in a garment it would be 1/2. And I'll sew this curved edge, match up at center front. And I would also overlock these edges on this, because if it went through the wash, it would ravel. But if it went to a dry cleaner's, sometimes they'll use pinking shears if it's a wool or some type of a finer fabric. Again, the quality of your category of merchandise will have different finishes. I know in my husband's wool suits, it's all pinking shears, and they're pretty high quality. All right, so now I have my lining and facing and my skirt. Again, the side seams would be together, and I would do this all the way around. So I'm going to join these two here and 1/4 inch. And this one actually would be 1/4 inch on the seam because it doesn't have any stress on it. You always want 1/2 inch seams if there's stress. So in this event, you know, there is stress on a lining. And with it being a lighter weight, you would want that extra seam allowance. But here, where the two self pieces are together, it's 1/4. And you would then understitch the facing. So seam allowance towards the facing. And so for the sake of your sample, this is what I want you to do. So your waist would finish like this. Instead of using a waistband, you'd have a nice clean finish like this. Now for the sake of the hem, I want you to do this as well. I'm gonna do a rolled hem, clean hem I should say. So I would do 1/4 inch hem on the lining. And again, it would go all the way around, you know, with the skirt inside. And 1/4 inch hem on the skirt. So usually in production, if it's a full skirt, this is the type of width hem that we use. If it has a lot of roundness, a circle skirt or a full, you know, shaped, bigger than a miniature A-line, but a bigger shaped skirt. Because that way when you go around these curves, you don't have the puckering. If you have a curved shape and you try and hem it with a more than a 1/4 inch hem, it's not gonna lay in right. So this will work fine for most dresses and skirts that are full. And then if you have a straighter skirt, then you want an inch hem. Okay, so that's your little skirt sample. Overlock your edges separately, keep them separate, and then you know that you have, you know, on the inside there's your lining and your hem skirt. Okay? Alright, so those are the two pieces that we want. But again, clean your edges for your notebook. And that is extra credit for anybody that gets this done, but I recommend trying it if you're behind in points. It'll earn you some extra points. And we'll have one more next week, a one-piece facing. I was teaching that in the draping class on Friday. I realized that the students had not had exposure to a one-piece facing, so I'm going to teach that one next week. Okay? Thank you.